Hello and welcome to a new Google Sheets tutorial in Practical Sheets. Today we're going to redo the inventory system I did 2 or 3 years ago for the channel, taking into account that Sheets has changed a lot, some of the formulas, some of the functionality, and also including some of the comments you've done about the system in the past. So I think it's a very good opportunity to start again from scratch system and start adding many new functionalities we could include today in Google Sheets. I know you're going to love it, but before you get into it, I'm going to show you very quickly what is it that we're going to do. So it is a very simple sheet where we're going to have 4 sheets: the product sheet, the purchase sheet, the sales sheet, and the inventory sheet. That's it. So we're going to do a candy selling company where we're going to bring a list of products with a reference, and then we're going to do a purchase sheet where you can select via dropdown any of the products which it'll bring automatically via a formula such as XLOOKUP or VLOOKUP the reference. And we're going to do data validation so that you cannot write anything other than a date here, and you cannot write anything other than a number here, or for example a negative number. So data validation is a very good way of making sure that your database is clean and it's not accidentally damaged. The same for the dropdown. You cannot select anything that is not one of your products. The same will happen for the sales. Will be practically the same sheet than the purchases with a couple of variations. And finally, we're going to do an entirely formula-based sheet where we'll bring from all of these 3 sheets the relevant data so that we could finally get to what we want to know, is how many units of inventory we have. There are many things we could add to this. For example, costing, pricing, batches, alerts, and much more. But I wanted to do this first solid foundation so that we can do a couple of more videos to add additional functionalities to the system. I know you're going to like it, but before we begin, you can download this template and use it immediately in the Patreon page. And if not, you can subscribe to the channel so that you can be notified when there's a new video, especially of this series of inventory and many other videos regarding forms, Google Apps Script, Google Sheets, and more that I publish on a weekly basis in the channel. So with that out of the way, we can begin. Let's begin, as always, from scratch. We're going to create a new Google Sheet. It's very important that you are signed in Chrome. This, you could do it in any other browser. I prefer Chrome because everything is connected with Google, but you could do it with Firefox or Edge or any other. So the easiest way to create a new sheet is sheets.new. Write it in your browser, and if you are connected to your Google account, it will automatically open a new Google Sheet. The first thing we're going to do is name our file. Let's call this Inventory 2024. We're going to star it so we can easily find it in Drive. And a good practice also would be to move it to a folder where you would like it to be. So let's begin quickly. The first thing, or the first sheet we're going to create, will be called products. This is the database or the sheet where you're going to store the information for all of your products. Depending on your sector, depending on the type of company or type of entrepreneurship or project you are doing, many different variables, many different attributes you're going to have for your product. The ones I've seen that repeat the most are the reference. Not all of you will have a reference, but it's a very good practice to have a reference. It could be a number, a code, it could be a word, or normally it's a numeric sequence, 0001, 0002, or for example, like a plate, like a license plate, 3 letters and 3 numbers, something like that could be. Then we're going to have the name of the product, or the order of the reference, how are you going to refer to it? And basically this is it. This is what normally repeats itself. we could have also a cost and a price, like a price list and a cost list that we could add in future videos. For now, I'm not going to go too much in the costing and the pricing, although it's a very important part. From there on, to each its own. You could have, for example, if you have perishables or you sell fruit, then maybe you have a expiration date. If you sell clothing, maybe you will have color, maybe you will have size. Sometimes you'll have categories. If you have a lot of products, it will be nice to have a category, even a subcategory. You could have a description, you could have a brand. There are many things you could have. I think that these 5, maybe a description or a comment section where you could put something specific about the product, could also work in most cases. So I'm going to leave it as it is, and you feel free to add any number of columns you want to the right. So we're going to get help from ChatGPT or something similar to build a sample list of products. So I've told ChatGPT I want to do a candy selling business. Here are 25 ideas of products that it gave me. So we're going to start with this. This is a very straightforward business, a retail business. I buy something and I sell this same thing. If you are going to buy something and sell something different, for example, you're going to group some of these items, or for example, you're going to sell some sandwiches and you're going to buy the bread and the ham and the cheese and then do some sandwiches. Maybe this won't work as well. Maybe we'll have to do a special type of file. And actually we've done it in some videos in the channel, so you could refer to that. We're going to create a reference number or code for each of these. Let's say candy, it will be CND 001, and we're just going to drop it down, double clicking on this small blue ball, blue circle, and then each will have its different reference. It's very important that it does not repeat itself. I'm going to leave all of these for now blank, but in future videos we could maybe play a bit with some of these other fields, especially the cost and the price. Now that we have our products that will be the base for everything else, we can start creating additional sheets. The first sheet we're going to create is the input sheet, or the purchase. If you're not going to be handling costs, for example, let's say you're going to manage an inventory system for a company for the, I don't know, documents in your company. So you really don't need cost and price. So maybe this won't be called purchases, but inputs, you know? But in the large majority of cases, 90% of cases, we will have to deal with costs in one way or another. So this will be a purchase. So for now, let's call it purchase, but you could call it as however you want. So here is where you start making decisions. The first decision is how are you going to choose your product? There are a couple of ways. One way is that you will choose it by reference. This is very handy, for example, if you're going to use, let's say, a barcode reader, or if you don't have that much reference. But sometimes you don't know the reference. You don't know that lollipops it's CND005. It's much easier to choose lollipops. So we have the two options. We could choose, when we're going to do a purchase, we could choose the reference or we could choose a name. I think it's much easier to choose the name. Even though we have a reference, in the practical world, in the real world, it's easier to choose by word, unless you have a system, for example, with a barcode reader. In that case, it's easier just to have the code. So we're going to do it a bit different than last video of the channel, where we chose the reference. So today we're going to choose the name. Then we're going to bring the reference, because I think it's good to have, even though we choose the name, it's good to know the reference and to have the reference always nearby. Most of the things to the right in our product sheet won't be necessary to bring here, because this is what we have, why we have the reference. Because if we sometimes need to know the category or anything, we could use a reference function such as VLOOKUP or XLOOKUP to know which is the category, the comments, etc. Price and cost may have a particular characteristic that we may see in a future video. This is why at this first stage, we're not going to talk about cost and price, maybe in a second video. So we have the name, the reference. What else do we need when we do a purchase? Normally, what we need is the date and the units. Because depending on your business, maybe you'll buy 1 to 1, but normally you will buy 10 or 20 or 100 or whatever. So we need to know how many units are you buying, when did you buy them? I think it's a good practice to know, and which product did you buy. These are the main things we need to know. Then we could add, again, much more things that we could add in future videos, but with these 4 is the minimum viable product for a very robust and basic inventory system. So let's start with the name. The name, we're going to choose it from our products. So this is why we're going to link it with a dropdown. There are many ways to create a dropdown. In the last few years, Google Sheets has tried to make it easier still. So we're going to write the at letter symbol, and we're going to start writing dropdown, the word dropdown. And this is the first option that we have. We're going to select it, and we have our dropdown. To the right, we have our dropdown panel, and we're going to change a couple of things. The first thing is that we're going to apply this to all of this column A, so that we don't have to do changes in the future. For this, we're going to write after A2, we're going to write column, and then the letter A without a number. This signals to Sheet that the dropdown should go up until the last row that it finds. In this case, my last row, it's the row 1000. The second thing we're going to change is the criteria. Here in this dropdown that says dropdown, with meta, we'll choose dropdown from a range. And then we're going to select this box. We'll go to products, and we're going to select all the names starting in B2. We start in B2, and we can go down with our mouse, or easier still, we're going to stand in this pop-up, remove the number as we did here in the range, click OK, and now we have it. If I go back to purchases, now I have my names, and if I change any names, if I delete any, if I change gummy bears and I put a number here, then the next time I do my dropdown, I have it updated without a problem. So this is my first step. The second step, and finally I'm going to click done here with just one final note, and is if you don't like this cheap style, I think I really like it, but many of you won't. So you can go to advanced options and click here on arrow. So it looks maybe a bit more simple and straightforward. I have learned to like the shape, but this is me. You could leave arrow if you prefer. Now let's hit done, close here, and there are a number of fields that are already in the products. For example, this reference. So I don't want to have to write it manually, because if I choose jelly beans, in my product base, there is already a reference for these jelly beans. So to avoid errors, the best thing to do is to create a formula that will take this jelly bean and look for the reference of this jelly bean. Traditionally, this is done with an VLOOKUP formula. Recently, both Excel and Sheets have introduced a formula called XLOOKUP. It's like a VLOOKUP, but easier to use. So next lookup, I'm going to first need which value to look up. So I'm going to select this A2, then hit the comma, then go to products and say, hey, where I'm going to look for this name, and I'm going to look up for it in column B. Another comma, and then say, hey, okay, once it finds it, what data do you want me to bring? And the data is this column to the left. So if it finds jelly beans, I want to see this CND003. For now, let's click enter, and it works perfectly. What I want for this formula is that I drag it down up until the last row, so that when someone chooses here another one, I don't have to drag it down manually each time. So let's drag it down a couple of rows, and you can see that it works here, but it looks weird when there is nothing in column A because of this error. Once we choose something, then it'll fix itself, but these errors tend to look unprofessional. So the way to solve this, much easier than with VLOOKUP, it's really simple. We'll just put a comma here and that's it. Because this fourth argument is what to do in the case of error. And in the case of error, I don't want it to put anything. So this is why I'm going to leave it blank, hit enter, and drag it again, these same 6 rows, and then it looks really nice, really clean. So I will drag it again up until my last row. I can stand here again in the first row where I'm sure I have my formula correctly written. And in my keyboard, I'm going to hit Control or Command, Shift, and down all at the same time, or all pressed simultaneously once, and then I'm going to press again the down button so it goes up until my last row. And finally, I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut Control D or Command D. What it does is to duplicate what was in the first cell in this one. When I do this and then I hit Control D, it will take whatever is here and duplicate it in all of my cells. That in this case is this formula. This is a good way to do it. A better way would be to use matrix functions or array formula functions. But we could do this in another video. I don't want to overcomplicate things. Finally, we have the date and units. What I could do is to apply data validation. Similar to this dropdown, I could apply specific data validation for date and units to make sure my data is clean from the beginning. Why I'm saying this? Because here I could write a date, January 1, 24. But if someone is in a hurry and they write 1/1/24, well, this is wrong. Or for example, they write a text by error. So it would be good to have a kind of validation so that if I write a text or if I write anything that is not a date, then it won't let it write. This is where data validation kicks in. So I'm going to stand here, go to data and data validation. If you can see, we already have one rule of data validation, that is this dropdown, because the dropdowns are a type of data validation. I'm going to add a new type of data validation. The range, again, as we did before, it will be from C2 up to C. So I'll write colon and then the letter C. And if I hit tab, then I can see that it has applied my data validation to all of my rows. But I don't want a dropdown. I want a date validation. So in criteria, I'm going to select this dropdown and I'm going to choose is valid date. And here, if the data is invalid, I'm going to say reject the input. Only permit to write dates. In this case, if I try to write text, it won't let me. If I try to write a number that is not a date, it won't let me. But if I write a date, it will allow it. Perfect. And here in units, I could also do a data validation. I could go here and then add another rule. It will be from D2 up to D. And instead of dropdown, we're going to say that is a number that is between 1 and 100. Let's click done. And if I write 1, it will let me, but if I write 0, it won't let me, although it's just showing me an alert. So I'm going back to my data validation, and in the advanced options, I'm going to say reject the input. So again, if I write 2, it's okay, but if I write 102, it won't let me, and if I write -23, it won't let me. I could do further validations. For example, I could do that it won't let me write a decimal. For example, 2.5. In this case, I can write it, But I could do a more advanced validation that I won't do it today because it's already 20 minutes into the video, so I won't do it, but just to let you know that it can be done. If you want, you can just ask me in the comments, or we can do it in the second video of the series. So this is it. We already have our date, we already have our units. Let's do, just for the example, have something here. We could format a bit our table so it looks nicer. There are many ways of doing it. We could do these alternating colors, and you could put a specific color. I'm not such a fan, but just so it looks a bit better. And we could remove, is a practice I would like to do. It's just select this G column with Ctrl Shift right. I will select all of the columns to the right, and then I'll hit Ctrl Alt minus. It's the same as right clicking here and deleting the columns. Also in the purchases, I can do the same. So format, alternating colors. If the other one was blue, maybe this will be yellow. Close here, and I will also remove, stand here in my column E, hit Ctrl Shift right, and then Ctrl Alt minus. So I can remove all of the columns, and it looks a bit nicer. The sales will be practically the same. So I'm going to duplicate this sheet, purchases. I'll click here, and then I'll say duplicate, and we're going to call this sales. Again, if this is an inventory not for purchases and sales, then you could call this output and this input. In sales, everything is practically the same with some variations we could do. The main variation I like to do is that I don't like to be able to sell something I have not bought. For example, here you can see that I bought 2 jelly beans, 3 Sour Patch Kids, but I haven't bought any lollipops. So in my sales, right now as it is, I could select lollipops, but I have no lollipops because I haven't bought them. Maybe if you have a drop shipping business, or you are associated with a drop shipping business, then you may sell something you don't have units, but then why do you need an inventory? So in the majority of cases, you shouldn't be able to sell something you have not bought. So we could do a very nice variation here, and we're going to stand here, go to data validation, go to the A2000, that when we duplicated the sheet, it duplicated the rules. So we have another 3 rules, one for the name, or for the date, or for the units. So we're going to modify this one. And what we're going to modify is that the range of products will not go and get it from the products, but from the purchases. That's it. So we're going to select this, delete what we have here, go to the purchases, and select this column A2, and as always we can remove the final number, hit OK, and now you can see that when I try to select a product to sell, it will only allow the products I have bought. Let's click down here, and in purchases I'm going to buy gummy bears, let's say, and we're going to buy 5 gummy bears, and now I go to sales, and now I do have my option to sell gummy bears because now I have bought them. Perfect. Now I have my purchases and I have my sales, and we can go to the inventory. One thing we could do, and if you like it, we could add it in the next video, but it's basically the same we've done here, is to have an adjustment sheet. Why an adjustment sheet? For example, it's very useful for when product is damaged, or when product is stolen, or when the expiry date has come and then you cannot sell it and you have to discount it from your inventory. So it is not exactly a purchase, but you do have to discount it or subtract it from your inventory. So you could have it in your sales as a special sale, let's call it. I think it's easier to have it in another sheet that it's called adjustment. So we could do this, but if you like it, we could add it in the next video. For now, to keep it as simple as we can, we're going to create our inventory sheet. The inventory sheet, we could also have the reference if you like. It will be basically the name, the reference, the units we have bought, the units we have sold, and the inventory. That's it. So let's begin. Let's write it here, the name, the reference. The reference is not needed, but maybe it's a good practice to always have the reference next to the name. There are two ways to do this. We could do it a bit more straightforward. So it's units bought, units sold, and then inventory. We could remove these two and just have name, reference, and inventory. I think it's good to have both so you can have a more precise view of why is the inventory 0. Is it because you haven't bought anything or because everything you bought has been sold? I think it's a good idea, but you could do it without it and do a monster formula here that includes the bought and the sold. Here, because we're learning also, I think it's good to have it a bit separate. So this is how we're going to do it. How do we bring the name? There are many ways of doing this. The first thing would be just to copy it. Take here, select them here, and copy it here. But it's not the best way because maybe sometimes the name will change. So another better way is to select all of the products you have here. So again, sorry, a mistake here. I will do equals, then go to products, select whatever I have in my product V2, and then I'm going to drag this down. This is also not recommended because what happens if you start inserting rows here, then everything will start moving along, then it will start disorganizing because if you add here another product, then you will never see it here because it jumped the product. So it's not a good practice also. Better yet is to use what I've described briefly during this video. Is called the array type formulas or matrix formulas. I'm going to remove, I brought this formatting. I'm going to clear the formatting so I don't see these stripes here. So what we're going to do is to use this bracket. It's called an array literal, and we go to our products, select. Sheets has a horrible thing is that it blocks my A2 cell here, so I have to stand in the B2. Let's delete it. Let's start again. Equals my array literal. Let's go to products. I'm going to choose B2. I'm going to change it manually with the left arrow to A2, and then I'm going to hit Ctrl Shift down. So it goes up until A26 in this case, but I want it to be able to get all of the products. So I will say Ctrl Shift down again, A1000, and I hit enter, and I have one problem because I haven't closed my bracket. So let's close it, and now I have it. Okay, so this is one way. Actually, I did it wrong because I brought the reference and not the name. So let's change A for B here and here, and now I have my. So this is the first way of doing it. How do I bring the reference? The same way I did here, so I can actually copy this formula. Let's copy it and let's paste it in my inventory here, and it's the same formula. I'm going to do it just on the first row, all of my formulas, and then I'm going to drag them all down. The units bought. The units bought, this is we're going to introduce a new formula called sum ifs. So sum if sums arrange based on a criteria. So what I want to do is go to my purchases and choose wherever. You can choose either of one of two, or the name or the reference. I think it's better to choose the reference, but maybe some of you won't have the reference and will only have the name. So in this case, let's do the name. For some reason, it got out of my formula. So I'm going to do, again, delete this, go to my purchases, select the column A, then I'm going to do a comma, and let's select the criteria. In this name, what name do I want it to add or to sum? And is this gummy bears. And finally, what do I want to add? I want to add the units. So this D column. Again, it got out of my formula. I think Excel is better at this part than Sheets. So we'll just do it manually. So again, this formula says that it will go to the column A in my sheet purchases, look for the names that match this name, gummy bears, and add all of the units that have been bought of gummy bears. Let's hit enter. For now, we're not going to autocomplete. Let's see if this adds up. We go to purchases, and effectively we've done gummy bears 5. And if I purchase another gummy bear product, and now will be 2 here, then I have my 7, so it works perfectly. And for the sales will be the same. We'll do sum if. We'll go to our sales sheet, select column A, comma, let's go to inventory again, choose our gummy bears, comma. Here is where sometimes it throws me out of the formula. We'll go to sales, and I will do it manually. Sales from D and column D. It means that it will take the whole column D. Let's hit enter. It will auto close the function, the parentheses. Perfect. Now I have 1 unit sold because I've done this example of selling 1 gummy bear. Finally, the easiest part is to do the inventory. So inventory is nothing more than taking the units bought and subtracting the units sold. And that's it. So 2 things to take into account. The first thing is that here I brought all of my product references, even if I haven't bought anyone. So this depends on you. You could do it like this. I prefer to only bring whatever I have purchased. So these 3 products. For this, we're going to change these products B2, B1000. I'm going to change it for, instead of products, I'm going to say, actually, let's delete this and go to our purchases and select column A, starting on row 2, so I don't bring the header. Let's hit enter. So it looks good. However, it is repeating these gummy bears. So because it is bringing exactly what I have here, and I don't want it to repeat. If I have multiple instances of purchases of gummy bears, then I only wanted to bring it once. For this, we can change this formula. We can add unique function, and now it's only bringing 1. Actually, I could also remove these brackets so it's easier. I don't need them anymore now that I'm working with the unique function, and it should continue to work. It's much cleaner, I think. So now, what is missing? So final thing is I could try to drag down, as we did in the purchases, try to drag down a couple of rows to see what happens. All of my 4 formulas. So here it works perfectly because remember that XLOOKUP has inherently an argument to work the errors. So here what we could do in this case, while we do the array formulas we're going to do in a future video, is to just manage this case where the units, but where we don't have a name here. So what we can do is, after the sum if, outside the sum if, include an if function that says that if this cell here, A2, equals to nothing, if it's empty, then just leave it as it is, comma, and then comma. When you leave with nothing, it would assume that it won't put any value in the cell. And we're going to copy this if and paste it in all of the other formulas. So here, F2, again, I'm going to paste it here, and here also, paste it here, and then I don't need to worry about the parentheses because when I hit enter, it'll close the parentheses. So now I can choose my whole formula row and Control Shift down once, twice, and then Control D, as I explained earlier, to duplicate, and that's it. So this should work perfectly. I'm going to stand also here in the F, Control Shift right to select all of the columns, Control Alt minus. Very good practice to start using the keyboard shortcuts. They save a lot of time, and that's it. We can do a lot of more things. We could do the dashboard so you can see which is the main inventory and all that. We could have also conditional formatting here to know which inventory is in 0 and much more. Okay, but for now, with this template, If you follow through, or you can download it in the Patreon page, you can then put your own products and start managing very easily your products and your sales and your inventory. And we could then do more advanced videos, including the cost, including alerts, and much more as I've done in the past. But given that Sheets has changed so much in the past 2 years, I think it's a good opportunity to update this tutorial. Thank you so much. And if you've liked it, you can go download the template immediately to the Patreon page, or just subscribe to the channel or comment below to see what else can we do with this new version of the inventory system in Google Sheets. Thank you especially to my Patreons. Their support is what keeps me doing these videos. Thank you so much. See you next time.